Number 1. Lily had always been drawn to the strays that roamed in and out of her small town. With a heart that was frequently too big for her own good, she often spent her evenings roaming the streets, keeping an eye out for any forgotten creatures that might have been left out in the cold. One rainy evening she stumbled upon a scraggly black cat perched on the edge of a crumbling stone wall, its green eyes gleaming like glass beads in the dim light. "Hey there," she whispered, crouching down. The cat blinked slowly, a gesture that felt almost intentional, as if it were sizing her up. Its fur was matted and soaked, but she noticed an unusual aura surrounding it. Something magnetic, yet a little bit eerie as well. Lily extended her hand, and the cat inched closer, nuzzling against her palm. "You're all alone, huh?" she murmured, feeling a strange connection. It seemed almost grateful. As she stood to leave, the cat followed her with an almost determined stride. Without much thought, Lily decided to take the cat home. She named it Shadow, a fitting title for its inky black fur and the way it slinked around her dimly lit apartment. That night, as she fell asleep, she heard a low purring vibrating through her dreams. Days turned into weeks, and Shadow became a fixture in Lily's life, but not everything was perfect. Lily noticed small things, most of them normal for having a cat around: a scratched up sofa, a toppled vase, but the most unsettling thing of all, that definitely wasn't expected, were the whispers she thought she heard at midnight from the kitchen. She brushed it off as her imagination. After all, it was just a cat. One night, an unbearable storm ripped through the town. Wind howled like a banshee, shaking the windows. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the kitchen, and Lily jolted awake. Heart pounding, she rushed to investigate, Shadow trailing closely behind. There, strewn across the tiled floor, was her kitchen knife, its tip glinting dangerously in the dim light as the wind howled outside. Another crash made her jump, and she turned to see Shadow diving toward a chair in the corner. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, but as she approached, her stomach twisted. The shadows in the corner shifted, contorted into shapes too grotesque to recognize. Tendrils of darkness slithered from the wall, and she caught glimpses of multiple moving eyes glinting back at her from deep within. "What the—" Lily gasped as Shadow leaped in front of her, hissing. The creature's whispers grew louder, threatening to consume her sanity. Realization hit her like a cold wave. Shadow wasn't really just a cat, it was a conduit, a gatekeeper. In the chaos from the corner, a darkness that longed for release. Lily backed away, terror rooting her to the spot. No, no, this can't be real. The shadows surged, pulling at her limbs, whispering promises of power and solace. She fought to regain her footing, looking at Shadow, who stood defiant, fur bristling, appearing as if it were ready to defend her, or possibly only wanting to protect the horrific secrets it harbored. With a trembling resolve, she grabbed the kitchen knife and aimed it at the darkness. "Get back!" she screamed, as the shadows recoiled in fear. Instead of escaping, they lunged at Shadow, who let out an earth-shattering cry that echoed through the storm. Then, silence. The shadows receded, leaving only the cat, now relaxed and purring as if nothing had transpired. But Lily knew better. That night she locked the door and listened to the rain, realizing it was not just her life that Shadow had entered, it was something far darker. A sudden chill crept over her as she felt the weight of a hidden danger, knowing she had unwittingly taken home a protector and a prison for something even more sinister. Number 2. The storm had just rolled in as they arrived at the sprawling, dilapidated estate that had once been a luxurious hotel. Now it stood shrouded in the shadows, its grandeur faded but still possessing an eerie charm. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with musty air and the scent of mildew. The group, 5 friends seeking adventure before the school year began, was thrilled and a bit frightened, but they quickly settled into the spirit of exploration. Their first night was spent sharing ghost stories in the dimly lit lobby, but a strange presence lurked in the corners of their minds. They couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. After a few rounds of drinks, they decided to investigate the upper floors, where the doors creaked ominously and the dust motes danced in the air. "Is that the maid?" whispered Jenna, pointing to a figure sweeping the hallway floor at the far end. The woman had a long braid falling down her back and wore a simple uniform that seemed out of place in the dilapidated grandeur. The friends watched her for a moment, an odd aura surrounding her. "Let's ask her about the history of the place," suggested Tom, his bravado instigated by alcohol. As they approached, the maid looked up. A deep, unsettling gaze met them. Rather than speak, she merely clutched the broom tightly and nodded slightly as if she recognized them. Feeling uncomfortable yet compelled, Tom stepped forward. "Hi, we're staying here for the weekend. Can you tell us any spooky stories about this hotel?" The maid's lips curled into a smile, but it felt more like a smirk. "Be careful what you wish for," she said softly, her voice smooth as silk but laden with something dark. Later that night, as the storm raged outside, strange things began to happen. The group felt disoriented. Shadows swirled in the corners, and whispers echoed in the air. Jenna, feeling a growing unease, suggested they leave early. The others mocked her unease, but the laughter faded as they heard a loud crash from the hallway. A loud bang followed by a raspy voice calling out their names. "Is anyone there?" Tom shouted, but only silence answered. Curiosity and dread intermingled as they crept toward the sound. They reached the corner where they'd last seen the maid and found her kneeling over something on the ground. As they approached, their skin prickled. She looked up at them with eyes that glimmered like molten gold. In the flickering light, they saw the shadowy outlines of strange symbols swirling around her. "You shouldn't have disturbed my work," she said, her voice echoing in the empty hall. "What are you talking about?" Jenna stammered. The maid rose slowly, and it was then that they saw the broom had transformed into a gnarled staff, the delicate wooden handle woven with living vines. With each wave of her arm, the air thickened, and a chilling wind swept through the hallway. "You've all taken from this place without respect. It feasts on your greed." Her voice turned sharper, almost melodic. "But now it will collect its due." Fear gripped the group as they shrank back, realizing too late the power they had taunted. Every ghost story they told became a shackling curse upon them. The maid, no longer merely a servant but a guardian of ancient secrets, smiled wickedly. "Show gratitude to those who serve you, young ones," she whispered as shadows began to envelop them, "or you may find yourself in a tale of your own." The storm raged outside, the thunder crashing as the echoes of their laughter faded into silence, leaving only an empty hallway where the witch of the hotel remained, ready to enchant the next unwitting visitors. Number 3. The wind howled around the dilapidated cabin where Mia, Jake, Aiden, and Lila had decided to spend the weekend. It was an old hunting lodge, long abandoned and rumored to be haunted. They had dismissed the tales, eager instead to enjoy a brief escape from their mundane lives. But as the sun set, the atmosphere grew heavy, and the forest whispered secrets beyond the trees. It was Jake who stumbled upon the hidden entrance, a trapdoor in the floorboards of the cabin's dusty kitchen. His curiosity piqued, he pried it open, revealing a dark staircase that spiraled downwards into the earth. The others exchanged nervous glances, but, emboldened by the thrill of their adventure, they followed Jake into the darkness. They descended the stairs cautiously, the air growing colder and mustier with each step. Looking on their phones, they cast weak beams of light that danced against the damp walls. Finally, they reached the bottom. The space opened into a cavernous chamber, its walls glistening with the strange luminescent fungi that pulsed with an eerie blue light. In the center of the room stood an ancient, intricately carved archway, covered in symbols none of them recognized. A sense of unease settled among them, but curiosity propelled them closer. "What do you think it is?" Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It looks like a portal," Aiden replied, stepping closer, his heart racing with anticipation. He reached out, fingertips brushing against the cool stone frame. The moment he touched it, a rumble echoed through the chamber, making the ground shake beneath their feet. Suddenly, a portal shimmered into existence, displaying glimpses of a vibrant world on the other side. Colors more vivid than any they had ever seen before, a landscape that twisted and writhed as if alive. The group exchanged excited looks. "Let's go in," Jake urged, already stepping forward. "No," Mia said, fear creeping into her voice. "We don't know what could be on the other side." But Jake was undeterred, stepping through the archway before anyone could stop him. The moment he did, a cacophony of sounds erupted from the portal, a chorus of laughter mingling with anguished screams. Panic surged through the group as they watched Jake become engulfed in swirling shadows, his figure twisting as he merged with the light. "Jake!" Aiden shouted, reaching for him, but it was too late. Jake disappeared entirely, leaving only an unsettling echo of his laughter behind. "We have to go get him," Lila cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We can't. We don't know what that is," Mia replied, grasping Lila's arm. But Aiden's resolve hardened. "I'm going. He's my friend." With that, he took a deep breath and stepped through the archway. One by one, the portal flickered with each step they could not take. "We should leave," Mia screamed, tugging Lila away. Yet it was too late. They stood paralyzed as the air grew weighty and an unearthly chill enveloped them. With a final flicker, the portal dimmed. A hushed silence filled the chamber, save for their distant howl that echoed like a mournful wail. Mia and Lila turned to each other, realization dawning like an ominous shadow. They were alone, and the forest above was whispering their names. The archway twisted, shifting at the edge of perception as dark visions of what lay beyond beckoned with irresistible allure. The decision to explore the unknown had irrevocably changed them, sealing their fates as the wind outside howled with their unending screams. Number 4. The sun dipped low behind the jagged silhouette of the abandoned warehouse, bathing the crumbling exterior in a sickly orange glow. Mara, Ben, Lena, and Josh stood outside the weathered wooden doors, the breath creating little clouds in the crisp autumn air. They had heard whispers about a traveling theater that showcased the most terrifying films you could ever imagine, premiering only in the dead of night. "Come on, it's just a movie. What's the worst that could happen?" Ben said, his smile faltering as he cast a glance back at the gloomy shadows. Mara shrugged. "Yeah, but have you heard the stories? They say the films trap you, that you can't escape until the end. It's all part of the experience." "Sounds like a gimmick to me," Josh scoffed, pushing open the creaking door. The air inside was thick, saturated with the smell of musty velvet and old popcorn. Flickering candlelight illuminated the narrow aisles, and the faint murmur of hushed voices resonated from the darkness. They found seats in the third row, the velvet lining frayed and stained from years of neglect. As the lights dimmed and the screen flickered to life, a chilling silence enveloped the crowd. Each of the friends exchanged nervous glances, the jovial atmosphere shifting as the film began. It was a grainy black-and-white movie, titled Into the Abyss. The tale unfolded with unsettling ease, following a group of friends much like them who stumbled into a forgotten world of horror. Uncanny events occurred on screen, echoing the unspoken fears of the audience. Shadows lurked in the corners, whispers threaded through the plot like thorns. About halfway through, something changed. The air turned electric, heavy with an unshakable tension. Mara squeezed Lena's hand, her heart thumping in sync with the thundering soundtrack. "Is this part of it?" Lena whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the screen flickered violently, blinding white flashes erupting like lightning. The audience gasped, and the film's audio warped into a jarring cacophony. Unseen forces seemed to awaken, tugging at the edges of the reality they once knew. Suddenly, the theater lights blazed back to life, illuminating the horrified faces of the other attendees, but not one of them remained seated. Instead, they stood, eerily silent but transfixed, their eyes glassy and devoid of humanity. A whirlwind of panic surged through the group as the volume of the film decreased to a whisper. "Stay with us." The friends scrambled to escape, but their exit was shrouded in darkness. Shadows surged forward, melding into grotesque shapes, and clawing hands reached out. Ben shouted, grabbing Josh's arm, "Run!" But no matter how fast they moved, the shadows pursued, twisting their forms to mimic those they sought to ensnare. Lena screamed as a piercing cry ricocheted off the walls, the sound a mix of terror and desperation. With nowhere left to go, the four huddled together, their breaths quickening. This is not just a movie, Mara realized, her voice barely audible over the oppressive silence of the audience. We're a part of it now. In that moment, the heavy film reel began anew, dragging them down into its twisted nightmare, a loop without an escape. As the laughter of unknown entities echoed through the darkness, Mara knew one terrifying truth. This time, there were no credits to roll. Number 5. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of the abandoned carnival, a rusted Ferris wheel towering ominously against the pale moon. Olivia, Jake, Mia, and Tom pulled their jackets tighter around themselves, a mix of excitement and apprehension coursing through their veins. The townsfolk often spoke of dreadful happenings at the carnival, rumors of blood-curdling screams that echoed through the night, and the mysteriously vanishing patrons. "Let's just get in, snap some photos, and get the hell out," Olivia said, her voice barely hiding her nervousness. The group had come to document the haunted place for their documentary assignment, but they felt the weight of dread mingled with the thrill of exploration. As they neared the entrance, they pushed aside the chain-link fence, its rusted links groaning in protest. The smell of decay and overgrown weeds lingered as they stepped onto the cracked pavement. "Look at this place. It's perfect for horror-themed TikToks," Jake exclaimed, pulling his phone from his pocket. "Let's just be careful," Mia added, uneasy at the flickering shadows that danced around them. "Remember what the old-timer at the diner said? What happened to the performers?" "Come on, it's just stories to scare kids," Tom scoffed, bouncing up to the dilapidated carousel, its once vibrant colors faded to ghostly hues. Without warning, the carousel creaked, its music box playing a hollow, melancholic tune that echoed in the chilly night. As they filmed, laughter ripped through the silence, but no one was around. "Did you hear that?" Mia whispered, her eyes wide as she scanned the area. "It's just the wind," Jake said, but his voice trembled slightly. The laughter morphed into agonizing wails, echoing like tortured spirits begging for release. "Maybe we should head back," Mia suggested, her skin crawling. Suddenly, shadows flitted at the edges of their vision, figures lurking in the darkness. The air thickened with dread, and they felt as if unseen eyes were boring into their souls. Tom laughed nervously. "Guys, this is just a prank, right?" Another wail pierced the air, silencing his laughter. The figures emerged, grotesque and unnatural, limbs twisted at impossible angles, faces obscured in shadow. They moved like marionettes, jerkily advancing toward the group, their laughter now a haunting cacophony. "Run!" Olivia screamed, the adrenaline kicking in. They dashed back toward the entrance, but the carnival seemed to warp around them. Every path spiraled deeper into the heart of the cursed ground. Jake stumbled, falling to the cracked pavement. "Help! I can't—" The moment he hit the ground, the shadows lunged, their twisted mouths stretching impossibly wide. His screams were swallowed by the night as his friends tore themselves from the phantom's grasp. They reached the carousel, breathless and terrified, but it began to spin, smoke rising from the center. The wails intensified, merging into a symphony of despair, clawing at their minds. "Tom, do something!" Mia shadowed as she struggled against the pull of the swirling mist. Tom, shaking, grabbed Olivia's arm and they leaped into a nearby booth, seeking refuge. But the figures surrounded them, their forms flickering in and out as if they were made of smoke. Their laughter echoed in the air, and in that moment they understood the curse. The carnival fed on fear, and they were its latest victims. One by one they were pulled into the night, lost forever to the shadows. The carnival stood silent once more, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting souls to wander into its cursed embrace. Number 6. Jake Malone had never meant to end up in Ironwood Penitentiary. A petty crime, breaking into an abandoned shop to swipe a few beers, had landed him in a stint behind bars, a mere 6 months of time served. But as his bus rolled up to the cracked, imposing driveway of the prison, he looked through the barbed wire and cracked stone walls and felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the chill in the air. Ironwood was more than just a prison. It was a relic of a dark history steeped in haunting tales. The guards spoke of them in hushed tones, the kind of stories that kept inmates awake at night. It's not the walls that keep you in, they'd say with twisted grins, but the whispers. Jake shrugged off the warnings, chalking them up to typical prison folklore. After all, he was only here for a short while. He was determined to keep his head down, serve his time, and get back to the real world. Yet, as the heavy iron door slammed shut behind him and the clanking echoed through the bleak corridor, a sense of foreboding crept into the back of his mind. That first night was restless. As he lay on the thin mattress in his cramped cell, his ears strained against the silence. The only sound was the occasional groan of the building, a reminder of its age. Around midnight, however, he was awoken by the fluttering of unseen whispers, soft and insistent, weaving through the bars like fingers in the night. Leave, leave, they seemed to chant, growing louder, filling the cold air surrounding him. Jake shut upright, heart racing. But the only source of illumination was the dim light cast by the flickering bulb above him. The next day, during the meager hours allowed for recreation, Jake met a group of inmates who spoke freely about the place's notorious past. They told tales of the Whistling Man, a spirit said to have been a murderer forever seeking penance. Many claimed to have encountered him, his mournful cries echoing around the dark corners of the prison, begging for release. Determined to dismiss the tales as mere superstition, Jake buried himself in chores and reading, but the voices became a constant companion, always lurking, always beckoning. Every night they emerged from the shadows, heavy with sorrow and desperation. He began to see flashes at the edge of his vision, figures moving in the dark, faces contorted in anguish. One fateful evening, unable to resist, Jake followed the whispers down the darkened hallways. They led him to the abandoned wing of the prison, long sealed off from the rest. His heart thudded loudly against his ribcage as he reached for the door, which creaked ominously open, as if it had been waiting. Inside, the air thickened with despair. The whispers crescendoed, reaching a figured pitch. Reaching deeper into the darkness, Jake could make out the outline of a man, translucent and sorrowful, his eyes pleading. "Help me," the apparition murmured, a breathless plea that gripped Jake's soul. Fear surged through him, and he wanted to turn around to flee, but he was rooted to the spot. "Please, help me escape," the Whistling Man implored, his voice like broken glass. Suddenly the walls began to shake, and an ancient rage enveloped the space around Jake. The faint rays of moonlight barely penetrated the gloom, transforming the whispers into deafening screams. All at once, Jake understood the truth. The whispers were not about escape, they were a warning. With a shrill cry, he stumbled back, tearing himself from the spirit's grip. He bolted down the hall, the echoes of anguished pleas chasing him all the way back to his cell. He relived that moment every night, haunted by the realization that Ironwood was not just a prison, it was a trap, ensnaring souls forever to linger within its walls, unable to escape the darkness. Number 7. The wind howled through the dilapidated halls of Raven's Hollow Penitentiary, a sound that echoed like a mourning cry. For Officer James Fletcher, his night shift had taken on an unsettling air. As the new guard, he had heard the whispered rumors about the prison, how prisoners seemed to fade into the shadows, and how deaths were reported at an alarming rate. But folklore of the damned had never truly restrained his resolve. As Fletcher made his rounds, the flickering fluorescent lights cast erratic shadows on the cold, damp walls. He felt a chill, but dismissed it as a mere draft from the aging infrastructure. His first stop was Cell Block C, home to some of the most dangerous criminals. The block was notorious for its violence, but tonight it seemed hauntingly silent. He walked past the cells, peering in cautiously. Most of the inmates slept, but one cell, C5, held his attention. The prisoner, a burly man with tattoos crawling up his arms, stood by the bars, an unsettling expression set on his face. Fletcher felt a stirring of unease as the man leaned closer, hands gripping the bars like a caged animal. "Let me out of here," the prisoner hissed, his eyes wide with a desperation that pricked at Fletcher's instinct for danger. "You have no idea what it's like. They come at night, and they take us." Fletcher chuckled nervously, raising an eyebrow. You're just having nightmares, buddy. Just try to get some sleep. He turned away, but the man's voice followed him, unraveling the tension within his gut. Sleep? You really think that's an option? They can smell fear, and you smell afraid. Night crept deeper, silence thickening the air, and the guard found himself unnerved by the prisoner's words, feigning indifference as he continued with his rounds. The rest of the cell block C seemed alive with a strange energy that he couldn't shake, a lingering presence at the edge of his consciousness. Halfway through, a sudden noise splintered to silence, scraping sounds that reverberated through the empty hall. Fletcher stiffened, his heart racing. It sounded like fingernails dragging against cement. He traced the noise back towards C5. The prisoner was gone from his cell. Panic surged through him. Fletcher dashed towards the source of the sound, praying it was just a risk he had failed to calculate. A pale light flickered overhead as he reached C5, finding the cell door ajar. He peered inside. The prisoner's bed was untouched, but little else remained within, except for a smudge of something dark that lay in the corner. It smelled metallic, like rust and decay. Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging the block into blackness. Fletcher fumbled for his flashlight, but before he could illuminate the darkness, something cold and clinging latched onto his ankle. He stumbled, feeling a presence circle around him, intangible yet undeniably real. "Help," a whisper echoed, one he recognized as the prisoner's voice. "Help me." Fletcher screamed as shadows flooded in, crawling up his legs, unyielding and insatiable. The chilling realization struck him. The deaths weren't accidents nor mere violence. They were deliberate, the prison a breeding ground for something far darker. As he felt himself being consumed, the lights flickered back on, revealing C5's cell door wide open. The cell was empty, save for shadows flitting away from the light. There would be no survivors tonight, only another name to add to the grim history of Raven's Hollow. And outside, the wind continued to howl, as if in sorrow for the souls claimed in the darkness. Number 8. The soft, eerie glow of the moon barely penetrated the tangled remnants of ivy and rusted iron that shrouded the abandoned industrial building. Once a bustling factory echoing with the sounds of machinery, it now stood apart as a decaying monument to time, an unwanted relic at the edge of town. Jake, an amateur urban explorer, had heard whispers of its haunted past, the stories of workers who vanished without a trace, and echoes of anguished cries that lingered within its walls. Equipped with nothing but a flashlight and a backpack filled with snacks, he stepped through a gaping hole in the decrepit facade. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. His boots crunched against shattered glass and crumbling concrete as he moved deeper into the building, his heart racing with excitement and trepidation. Shadows crept along the walls, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to flicker at the corner of his vision. He quickly brushed aside the creeping unease, attributing it to his imagination. With each step, he descended further into the heart of the factory, following the murmur of what he thought was a distant wind, coaxing him on like a siren song. As he ventured deeper, the environment shifted. The air grew colder and more stagnant. The machinery loomed like skeletal sentinels in the dark, covered in layers of rust. Jake's flashlight flickered ominously, and he tightened his grip on it, feeling a palpable tension in the air. Suddenly, a sound pierced through the silence, a faint whimper echoing from below. The noise clawed at his curiosity, pulling him toward a rusted metal staircase leading down into darkness. On the damp, creaking steps, each footfall reverberated like a drumbeat in the silence. A vast, cavernous chamber that had once been the epicenter of the factory's operation. Chains hung from the ceiling like skeletal remains, swinging slightly, though there was no breeze to move them. Jake's heart raced. The whimper echoed again, and he followed it into the depths. As he reached a small alcove, he stumbled upon something remarkable. An old control panel flickered to life with dim lights, illuminating a scene of horror. The wall was lined with photographs of workers, their eyes hollow, mouths open in eternal silent screams. The culmination of dread settled in his chest as he saw not just men and women, but blurred faces, morphed and twisted, almost as if the building itself had devoured them. A chilling realization coursed through him. These were not mere photographs. They were warnings, remnants of lost souls entrapped within the industrial behemoth. The webcam-like monitors that flickered around the room displayed dark figures moving in the dim corridors of the factory, their movements jerky and unnatural. Then the whimper turned into a howl, a deafening sound that bounced off the concrete walls. Fear pricking at his skin, Jake turned to leave, but the shadows solidified, coalescing into a mass, a churning darkness that blocked his path. The air grew thick, heavy with dread as he felt unseen eyes bore into him. With terror gripping his heart, he ran, racing up the steps, only to find that the way behind him had vanished. Brick walls surged where the exit had been. The howls grew louder, a cacophony of the damned. They beckoned him forth, urging him to join their ranks. Jake's flashlight flickered and died, plunging him into absolute darkness. Alone, he could only hear the echo of his own breathing and the ghastly chorus that whispered his name in the deep, reminding him that in the belly of a beast, terror never truly dies. It merely waits for another soul to swallow.